Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey, are you an aging athlete? Are you over 40 and struggling to get your desired results? I understand your frustrations. If you're like me, you're trying to get your running back or your cycling back or whatever sport you love to do, and you just can't figure out what's missing in your performance gains. How is your training and fueling program working for you? That's what I do. I personalize your nutrition and health program for you based on a bunch of different things. We collect data, collect clues from nutritional therapy assessment, from a food log with symptoms. Look at your genetics. If you've done something as DNA Fit, look at blood chemistry panels. Let's look at functional lab tests as a Vibrant Wellness wheat zoomer to test if you have leaky gut and sensitivity to wheat, peptides in foods. Look at food sensitivity labs. And Dutch tests, look at your hormones. So we look at all these hidden internal sources of chronic stress that may be impacting your ability to burn fat, improve performance, and longevity. So if you want to talk about how we can personalize your fueling, training, and performance plan, let me know. Set up a discovery call. Head to my website, debbiepotts.net, and reach out. Set up a call and we can chat about how I can help you be the best version of yourself. So you can stop blaming the aging process and instead change your mindset that you're embracing the change, that we train differently in our 40s and up versus what you did when you're 20, 30-year-old. We need to adjust how we eat, when we eat, why and how, but also match our nutrition with our exercise program and add some more health building lifestyle habits into our day. I call this all the Holistic Method Comprehensive Coaching Program, where I work on individualizing clients' nutrition, exercise, stress reduction, sleep, movement, time outside, digestion and gut health, hydration, and my favorite, happiness, play, and laughter. So if you want to know more how you can be your best self, live your best life, and perform your best, head to debbiepotts.net, schedule a discovery call with me, and we can get started on your new health building journey. You can be that amazing athlete and stop blaming the aging process. Hello, fellow endurance athletes and my aging athletes as myself, who are trying to reverse the aging process or improve it and not blame it. That would be me, the aging female athlete, and I'm on a mission to run faster and get my strength and speed definitely needs to improve. I'm not going to blame the aging process now that I'm 50 that I can't run a 1:35 half marathon again, and getting a marathon. I used to do 3:12 was my best time in Boston and 3:17 in Boston. And in an Ironman, I could do a 3:45 split on my run. And I struggle since my adrenal exhaustion, air quotes around that, HPA access dysregulation, metabolic chaos, whatever you want to call it, whatever happened to me starting back in 2013, 10 years ago almost, that I've never been the same. So that is my mission on this show and the way I coach people with the elements of the holistic method and investigating what is actually going on from the inside out using functional lab tests and using functional medicine optimal ranges, not your doctor's blood chemistry labs with a range of 10 to 400 and your normal range. It's a bunch of crap. So I'm on a mission to help get you fit and healthy and happy from the inside out to improve your performance now, but improve your performance in life as your future self when you're 60, 70, 80, 90 years old. So with that, today we're talking about running, and the doctor on running that I've heard about for many years is I used to do barefoot running, kind of Newton running shoe what was it called? We did the seminars at my fitness studio when I first opened it. Fitness Forward Studio in Bellevue, Washington, 2010. I used to try to host all these different seminars, natural running, biohacking, self-care health fairs, sauna, acupuncture, all this stuff, metabolic testing, before people knew what it even was. So I was ahead of the time, but didn't help my business. It was a constant stress, which is why I had health issues. But Dr. Mark is someone I talked to or heard about years ago, and he was in town here in San Diego at the Low Carb USA conference, and I was hoping to go talk to him, and I didn't make it there, which is so hard to. I moved down here, obviously, now 2 years ago from San Diego or Seattle to San Diego, and all these seminars that I always attend were down here, and now I live here. It's so hard to go to seminars when you live in the same town. You rather go play and bike and run and go walk on the beach, and now it's hard. There's conferences here. So I didn't go to Low Carb USA as I had planned, but I got to podcast with Dr. Mark the week afterwards. So we're going to talk about how to run faster as an aging athlete, fueling tips for the endurance athlete, how to match your nutrition with your exercise. What about nutritional ketosis for the athlete? Does it matter? Keto Flex, should we in and out of ketosis? What athletes would benefit from going over a more lower carbohydrate approach? How we can test who is best to be training to burn fat versus carbs, metabolic testing, as I used to do for many years, way back in 2005 until, when did New Leaf got bought out by Lifetime Fitness? Maybe 2015. So Dr. Mark Cucuzella is the guy we're talking to. He does a lot. So I'll put all of his links in the show notes, but he has freedomrun.org. He organizes a running store. He's got Dr. Mark's desk website. He's got a lot, but his purpose and passion and why we'll talk about today, as I always like to ask clients or guests what their why is. But Mark is a champion in using low carb therapeutic intervention to help patients with diabetes to achieve remission. Dr. Mark Cucuzella is a professor from West Virginia University School of Medicine and retired Air Force Reserve Lieutenant Colonel. He practices family medicine and West Virginia University's Jefferson's Medical Center, and he's developed and adopted a low carb diet for remission for type 2 diabetic protocol, using low carb for patients with obesity, prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and practicing what they preach. The hospital has eliminated, can you believe this, all sugar-sweetened beverages from the hospital. That's amazing, especially as you know, I lost my dad June 14th this year, and he was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and I was disgusted on what the hospital served people. Plus, the guy in the bed next to my dad had type 2 diabetes, and I was listening when I was in the room with my dad. I could hear them offering this guy soda and juice, and all this stuff is ridiculous. So I'm happy to hear Dr. Mark's making an influence in the medical system, but his current research interests are continuous glucose monitors for diabetes remission, therapeutic carbohydrate reduction for severe pediatric obesity. He leads all different groups, and on and on and on. This guy does a lot, and he's also competed for 40 years, achieving a streak of 30 consecutive years of running a marathon under 3 hours. He's finished events up to 100 miles. So he is in West Virginia, and he owns, I don't know how he does all this. He owns a small community running store and directs running races and camps for youth and adults. So this guy is unbelievable. You've probably heard of him if you've been in the running industry for a long time in natural running and metabolic efficiency testing. His book is called Run for Your Life, book.com. You can find it. Run for Your Life summarizes the science and the soul of running, nutrition, and physical activity to help you maintain a vigorous life. So check out the links in the show notes. Head to debbiepotts.net, and you can find all the links on the podcast tab. But you can also just head to drmarksdesk.com and learn more about this ambitious guy who's really make an impact in our society. So I welcome Dr. Mark. Let's bring him on. Hi, everyone. It's Debbie, and I'm recording a podcast in my glass house, and I think, 105 degrees outside. So in here, it's like that hot. So I've got this fan that I'll turn off because it's so loud. But check this out. If you're watching the video, it's one of my dad's collections of fans because they always like to be cool. And you put it around your neck, and it has different lights and keeps me cool because it's hot in here. So I'm wearing my bathing suit because I was swimming today, and then a beach cover up. So I'm ready to go swimming, but I'm more dressed for this hot weather in my little podcast studio here. So I am going to record a fun Oh, there we go. Hot. High level podcast with Dr. Cucuzella. And if you're a runner, you probably heard of Dr. Mark. He is a low carb runner for over 10 years, wrote the book called Run for Your Life. And he was just here in San Diego last week speaking at the Low Carb USA conference, which I missed, and wanted to connect with him because I want to share how to fuel and train for the endurance athlete, but also how to get faster running. I'm on a mission to get my run speed back. I once upon a time would do marathons. 3:12 was my best Boston time, 3:17. And my half marathon, best was Carlsbad up here where we live now. And 1:33, 1:35, somewhere in there I try to hit. Now I'm lucky to get a 2 hours, my goal for a half. And to me, that is like 25 minutes off my goal time. So I've got a ways to go. I'm challenging you that is not about blaming the aging process, but embracing the aging process. And women, and I think men too, as we get older, instead of doing all the long, slow distance, we need more recovery time, like 2 days in between our running, and more speed work, but not overtraining. So it's a fine line when I'm working with clients where to place those key workouts and get rid of the junk miles and not try to run every day, but have a purpose to each run. Have your long distance run in appropriate timing before a race. I'd add in pace work. And then during the week, I'm doing the minimalist effect, 30, 45 minutes on a run up to an hour, but less is more. I used to do a lot of volume, and now I'm just doing less workouts, more of the minimal effective dose, and doing a long run on my Sundays, as I've done forever as an Ironman athlete. Yeah. Bike long Saturdays. We run long Sundays is just my routine. And excuse me, the challenge is just figure out, work hard, run harder, but recover in between those intervals and do, as I said, more active recovery in between those days. Finally, I joined the San Diego Track Club last week and did a Tuesday night run group at 6 p.m. I'm an AM person to work out hard, and so evening is a challenge, but I did it. And the other challenge is it disrupts my sleep. So I'm sacrificing my 8:00 bedtime because I wake up early so I can get track workout in, because if you can find a group near where you live, I used to always do Tuesday nights 5:30, and then I used to run my own run group at Wednesdays at 6 p.m. It really helps challenge you and pushes you for those intervals. So if you're doing 400, 800, 1,000 meters, 200 meters, we did a little bit of everything. Should be equal to 3 miles of speed work, but really going hard and then recover, which is one thing. The recovery, I walk, get my heart rate down, and then jog, and then start the next one. But I was fascinated by these people that I was running with doing speed workout. They would jog on the recovery. I'm like, how can you jog? I need to walk. So I think people can go harder if they recover longer. So kind of that rest-based training I like. So anyways, let's talk to Dr. Mark. We'll talk about nutrition and training. And he had some exercise tips to give people, and then exercise testing. So let's see what he has to say and bring him on the show. Hold on. All right. I've got the man, Dr. Mark, on the show to talk all things running, efficiency, fueling, training, how to improve our speed, performance in races, longevity, all of the above. You're going to tell us the secrets. Thanks for coming on and joining the Low Carb Athlete podcast.
Thank you, Debbie, for having me on. I don't know if we'll be able to hit all that in an hour.
I know, right? We have so many topics.
Yeah. We'll see what direction it goes.
I think just I'll I shared your intro, your background, just if people haven't heard of you. I've heard of you, as I said, for years, and, going into metabolic efficiency testing, into natural running 4 years ago. And I used to own a fitness studio for 10 years, and I attempted to host all these events like the natural running seminars with, who is it? Oh, who did it for Newton running shoes. He
Danny
did ultra.
Abshire, probably, and Ian Adamson.
Ian.
Way back. Yeah.
Yep. So we used to do that 10
travel
years
a lot
ago.
teaching this stuff.
Yeah, that's right. That's probably where I met your name from. But, all this information over the years, how long you've been doing this? What is the biggest thing you think is what we need to share with people in today's date of, people learning about more so low carb and fueling, getting faster, and metabolic efficiency? Where do you think we are in the running industry and endurance athletes?
Gosh, it's a great question, and maybe like to bring it down to like one slide. I think what all of us are trying to do, Debbie, is try to become like a healthy human organism, right?
Yes.
And that has to do with hardware. So that's strength, posture, structure, bone density, muscle mass, like that's how we're built. And then there's software, that's how we move, right? That's all the biomechanics that Ian and Newton running and I used to try to teach, don't smash into the ground with your leg overstretched, but that has to do with your movement patterns all day, like how you lift things, how you sit, how you stand, because people end up with musculoskeletal injuries all the time. And some of them are debilitating injuries, disc herniations, needing knee and hip replacement. So how we move is important. But then our energy systems are really important. So that's how we make ATP. That's the currency of muscle contraction. So if any one of those are greatly neglected, the whole system shuts down. And I think we're all just trying to get better and stay in the game, whether you're trying to compete or not. We're all just trying to be able to get ourselves up off the floor, 80 or 90 years old, so we don't end up in a care home. But then we all want to be able to, if we don't have those elements in place, you and I both love to be outside doing anything, right? Hiking, running, biking, being with friends. And if you can't have those components.
Now go.
We got interrupted quickly there, but yes, if any one of those components aren't there, we're not going to be happy people. We'll have depression too. My mood stabilizes every morning if I can go run, and I don't think the rest of my day would work. So I think everyone has to just look at it like what's in it for them, and why do they want to stay healthy? It's not about, I'm almost 56, it's not about setting personal records, or finishing ultra long endurance events. At the end of the day, it's, those are just kind of, icing on the cake if you could do those things. But I think if any of us out there listening, if we took away your ability to go exercise, I think your life would not be whole. And you could probably take away your entire retirement account before you would want me to take away your physical activity. And I think that'd be a fair statement. Like, what would make your life less fulfilled? Losing your entire retirement account or losing your ability to go out and do what you love?
Yeah. And I think that's so important as we get older, that we focus, as I say every show, to focus on how we're training to set ourselves up for 70, 80, 90 years old and be able to move right and have good posture and have physical ability to keep doing what we're doing and thrive every day. But what are some things that we can do now to improve our endurance? So metabolic efficiency, we've talked about on and off over the years. Maybe start with that, and how to improve fat oxidation. If people are fat adapted athletes, how do we get faster and train so we're burning fat at higher rates? Because we talked to Zach Bitter, we talked to S Fuels, Leighton Phillips, and really diving into this a little bit more to teach people, all right, I'm fat adapted, now what? Like, how do I improve that aerobic engine and get faster and be able to go longer?
Yeah, that's a great question, not with one direct answer, because if you compare what's happening in Zach Bitter's physiology to I deal with diabetes patients all day, to a type 2 diabetes patient. So we call it a zone 2. And what zone 2 is, and everyone listening here probably is familiar with that term, that's that aerobic base. And what that really represents is the maximum effort or, maximum heart rate where you're recruiting the type 1 fibers. So the type 1 fibers are the fibers that are highly efficient at using fat for fuel. Now, someone like Zach Bitter can probably run at a 7-minute mile still be in zone 2, meaning he's not needing to tap into what are called the in-between fibers, these fog fibers, fast oxidative and glycolytic fibers. So he's pretty much staying just in type 1. And by doing a lot of work in that area, you're building tons of capillaries and mitochondria in those type 1 fibers. And the magic that does is that allows us to actually do more work later in the higher zones. Because in the higher zones, what happens when you go into the exercise lab is your lactate starts to trickle up. So we all have a level of exercise where we're maintaining the same lactate levels. We're able to clear this out without developing acidity. And we're trying to push that up. Now, if you have a huge base of type 1 fibers, this is like old Arthur Lydiard training, like whether you were a miler or a marathoner, he had everyone go out and do these 20-mile runs, just most of that off-season training. But if they started even in season to get kind of stale or overtrained, he would have them go back and do that zone 2 stuff. He didn't call it zone 2, but that aerobic stuff. So you're building this huge base of type 1 mitochondria capillaries. And what happens is now, like say you're in a race, like say Zach is running a 100-mile race, and he's got to just haul up a mountain where he's tapping into zone 3, maybe even a little bit into zone 4. He's creating more lactate, but his massive base of type 1 fibers can shuttle that lactate back in to these magical energy chambers called mitochondria. So instead of shuttling to acid, the lactate can shuttle back into the mitochondria and produce more ATP and no acidity. So I hope that makes basic sense. But the bigger that type 1 base, the more you can use fat for fuel, and the more you can even go into that sugar burning zone, but still be able to maintain the pace. Now, a diabetes patient, for example, and you've talked about respiratory exchange ratio and crossover points on your show. So if a well person is just walking the dog, that's zone 1. You're just going out for a little walking the dog. You're using almost all fat for fuel, and your respiratory exchange ratio is about 0.7. It means you're not producing a lot of carbon dioxide. Now, if while on that dog walk, someone starts chasing you and you start running, and now all of a sudden your respiratory rate picks up. So now your respiratory exchange ratio is about 1. You're burning carbohydrates and you're blowing off more CO2. So therefore your respiratory rate picks up. So I think anyone out there, riding a bike or running, say you're on a easy coffee ride with some friends, and then all of a sudden, your younger friend starts tightening the screws, right? They could still be in zone 2 chatting away, and your respiratory exchange ratio goes up. But a diabetes patient, we're talking about type 2 diabetes, not type 1, totally different physiology. So these folks are at 1.0 at rest. And when they go for a walk, even out the door, their lactate goes up and they're 100% carb burning, and they're miserable. They don't like it. I've done thousands of exercise tests in the hospital on mostly medical patients, not athletes. And they get acidotic in what we would call a Bruce protocol at stage 1, stage 2. And their heart rate goes up, their respiratory rate goes immediately up as soon as they start walking. So that person really needs to fix their diet first and go ridiculously slow. And I'm talking about ridiculously slow.
Is that like maffetone, the max aerobic function, or what slow?
Probably even lower, because they can't even burn fat for fuel sitting on the couch. So they've got to, ideally be low carbohydrate. There's some medications that can help those folks become more insulin sensitive. So they're the sick folks. Now, the folks like Zach, they're really well enough. He wanted to upregulate his ability to use fat for fuel more than the normal Tour de France rider, which he has done. We could link to the FASTER study. So people who have fat adapted, meaning taken months and months, even years, to upregulate their ability to burn fat for fuel. This is where the low carb diet comes in. And those folks can burn up to like 1.8 grams of fat per minute, where the normal mortal elite athlete who's not fat adapted might be about 0.6 to 0.8. So that's a choice an athlete makes based on whatever type of event. So Zach's type of events are perfect for that. They're 100-mile races. There's no what we would call glycolytic work. where a Tour de France racer, there is a ton of times in that Tour de France where they've got to like go all in and be able to kind of light matches, so to speak, to be able to burn fast acting glucose to be able to go up Alpe d'Huez. So they're Ironman, really not much glycolytic work. So someone's training for an Ironman, it would behoove them to be massively fat adapted in diet and training both, because there's really not much sprinting or, surges or, you watch the Tour de France attacks, right? But maybe back in the Mark Allen days, you could watch them and they were really kind of attacking each other on the bike. And there was some of that stuff going on, but
if you're pro in Ironman, it's totally different than age group or like I would try to be best in my age group, but I would, be pushing it hard on the bike to keep my top end of my aerobic heart rate. And my goal was always, how fast can I get to stay, at my peak heart rate where I'm still burning primarily fat. So then you can go into the run and, feel pretty kind of fresh. And then you can do what you can to finish and pick it up and do surges. But I think it depends, if you are just trying to finish it, or are you trying to place in your age group, or you're professional trying to win money.
And again, the professional winning money is a different ball game too, because it takes, and I've been in the exercise lab multiple times, and it probably took like 4 years of being low carb before I was up in that upper, 1.8 grams per minute of fat oxidation. So if you have a pro contract on the line, or you got to feed the family, and it takes 2 years to fully adapt to fat metabolism, but you're going to sacrifice some performance, you may not be willing to make, or if that type of a sacrifice. So again, but most of us are in this for health. So I think making that adaptation there's no downside for your health and ultimately your performance. But I think something we could talk a little bit about, Debbie, was, so during that event, and we talked about it in San Diego this weekend, what a lot of people don't realize or understand, they're called these insulin-independent glucose transporters, blah, blah, blah. So I'll bring that down into, so you take you or me sitting around and say I put some honey in this tea right now, which raises my blood glucose, and then insulin will respond and bring this little transporter called GLUT4 to the surface of the cell and bring that glucose in. Now, if I start exercising, muscle contraction will also bring these little magical GLUT4 receptors to the surface of the cell, meaning now that I'm exercising, I can dispose of glucose, and if you've trained that system well, you can dispose glucose while you're exercising. So you kind of keep that blood glucose stable. So if you listen to Zach and his race strategy, when he's racing, he's not relying on glucose, but certainly he's adding, essentials and some other carbohydrate containing products, so you're able to kind of drip that carbohydrate in without needing insulin to rise. So you're not shutting off your fat burning engine. So that thing is still going strong. Because you started the race, you're burning fat, and now you're able to trickle in the glucose without raising insulin. Insulin shuts off fat burning. So the worst thing someone can do, and someone asked this question this weekend, what do they do before a long event? A guy was going to be swimming some long channel. It was going to be like a 5-hour swim, and wanted to make sure, he's maximizing fat oxidation, and say, what you don't want to do is have a bunch of carbs before you start your event, because that spikes your insulin. And then you start the swim or start your race, insulin's up, so you're not burning fat at all. But once you get moving and you get that, I call it like the electric battery and then the gas tank. So the electric battery is like fat burning, you get that big log on the fire going, and then, you can trickle in glucose. And low blood glucose, if any of y'all have experienced that during an event, will make you want to just stop, because your brain says, Debbie, I'm done, right? And then, everyone has experienced this. They think they're done, right? They think they've just bonked. And even on like a ultra course, you'll take a shot of Coke or something like that, and it brings you back from the dead.
Yeah.
Because what that did was your blood glucose was just tanking. And it wasn't that you bonked, you were out of glycogen, you ran out of, like, we'd never run out of fuel. Our brain protects us from dying. So if it's sensing blood glucose is down, it's shutting off motor units and it's just telling you stop. But that's something to play with. Always have a little bit of glucose. And even if you're fully fat adapted, always have a little bit of glucose. Once you're moving, that glucose is like rocket fuel.
Yeah.
Like on top of your big fat burning battery, so to speak.
So that kind of ties into what we're saying is been talking about a lot is training low. Like Dan Plews, I've been going over his Endure program, and it's that train low, and Peter Defty, optimal fat metabolism we talked about a lot. So training low and then matching that with your exercise, with your fueling, keeping your carbs low and eating more healthy fats and protein, and then strategically timing your carbohydrates so you're in a fat adapted state. But what I'm finding a lot of people and different theories, and Jay Feldman's talking about energy metabolism, it's still like we need to be able to metabolize carbs. So there's a few different thoughts. We'll kind of break it up, but that's like, how to teach people to burn fat, how we're training and how we're eating. And then once you get to a certain point, I feel like people still need to be able to metabolize carbs, because a lot of people go one end to the other and they don't realize they have to flex back and forth. And I think that's becoming a big topic lately is, all right, I'm fat adapted, I'm keto, now carbs, I'm scared of carbs because they'll spike my glucose and I don't want to get out of fat burning when I'm training or racing.
Yeah, actually the opposite is true. Like everything, or, there's two sides to every argument, and then there's the truth, or at least we keep searching for the truth in science, but human experience tells us a lot. So the really amazing work has been done by a gentleman named George Brooks. 30 years he's been talking about lactate and the lactate shuttle, and Inigo San Millan at University of Colorado has written a lot on the topic. So the best zone 2 athletes, Tour de France riders, any endurance triathletes, marathon runners. So the best zone 2 athletes, can burn the most fat at very high power outputs. There's even there was an article with Eliud Kipchoge's physiology, and his fat max, even though he's not a low carber, and he's probably only burning about 0.8. I'd have to pull up the study, but his fat max, like that's his zone 2, where you're maximally using fat for fuel before you start shifting to more glucose. He's running about a 5-minute mile. And then the article was about what it would take to do the 159. So when he's doing a 159, he's like lighting matches. He's like 12% fat, 88% sugar, at 4:38 pace. And at 5-minute pace, he's like 80% fat, 20% sugar. So it's like dramatic. Like, so how do you push that out? So that he had strategic carbohydrates during that event. They do the wind tunnel testing of all the pacers, so all the magic they did to try to really cut that little margin out. But what you also see in the best fat adapted athletes, they're also the best sugar burners too, because of that big zone 2 and their ability to absorb lactate. So the diabetic patient, for example, can't even burn carbs well. Their mitochondria are so dysfunctional. Even though they can't burn fat at all, they can't even burn carbs well. But the best zone 2 athlete, someone back in your day, Debbie, like Mark Allen, right? So he did a ton of zone 2 maffetone style training, but he could burn carbohydrates and fat like a beast, right? So then on race day, I'm sure he's using carbohydrates very efficiently because he can still like use both tanks. So by that, doing that zone 2 training, you're boosting your ability to be metabolically flexible would be the term people throw out, but to optimize metabolically flexible, you want to have, right, just like you have a vehicle, you want to have a big electric battery and a good gas engine too, and then you're like good to go, not like a little one. You don't want to have a big electric battery, little gas, then you might not be able to floor it up the mountain. So that maybe that's a good way to think about it.
Would you train people first staying in just zone 200% of the time? And then like maffetone would do that until you're not seeing results, do a monthly test, and then start adding in speed work twice a week. For example, like Paul Larson talks about HIIT science, and then work on nutrition, or how would you suggest?
I think mix it all in and do what's fun for you. So I think people become slaves to technology it makes it less fun. And I think a lot of us, probably you too, Debbie, at this point, like, if you can carry a conversation, you're in zone 2-ish.
Yeah.
So you're fine. Now, if on a weekend you want to join the group and add some diversity and go a little quicker, that's totally fine. Every day you should be doing something for neuromuscular speed and coordination, doing something for strength. So I finish every day, I'm just doing like morning meditative zone 2-ish running just to clear my head. But at the end of that run, I'll take like 10 minutes to do sprints and skips and strides and different things, plyometrics, to work on that neuromuscular coordination and strength, where after 50, we all know that starts to decline. So the older you are, the more you got to add that stuff in.
So I think it's good to do end of your workout. But
yeah, for sure.
It.
And that's actually a really important point, Debbie, because people, should I start my workout with more intense stuff and then finish it with the more mellow stuff? No, because what that'll do is it'll sabotage the slow stuff, because once you've developed high lactate, you've shut off fat metabolism. So if you do a bunch of intervals like early in your workout and then say, well, then I want to go finish with 30 minutes of zone 2, your lactate is up. So you're not using fat at all. Now, all of us kind of know intuitively, if we're going to do high intensity, it always feels good once you've kind of got that zone 2 engine opened up. And then you feel like you're ready to do something a little bit harder. If your brain feels like it, right? Like if you've had a hard day at work, poor sleep, a lot of stress, don't add another stress, but just think of it like that. So once you've kind of built up a lot of lactate, you've shut off fat metabolism. So start mellow and then add that stuff at the end.
So tie in nutrition with that. So if you are doing a workout, we're saying before, you don't want to eat carbs beforehand because you'll shift carb metabolism when you want to be doing a longer, like zone 2 workout. So if you are finishing on HIIT, would you, in the morning, do you do it fasted or?
Oh, of course. Yeah. I think, none of us are probably out listening to this, or we're not doing 4-hour professional workouts. So ours would be, you got an hour and you could do 50 minutes, zone 2 easy, and then 10 minutes of HIIT. But no, if you're going to be doing, like, say you're a Tour de France rider on a professional team and you've got a 4-hour ride, and which with an hour of that being high intense, of course, they're going to add in some carbohydrates, to be able to do that intense part of that workout, because they're shooting for power and performance. So they won't be able to reach those performance goals without, but that's probably 1% of people listening to this are in that category.
So when you work out in the morning, do you have coffee with anything in it, or what do you do before a long workout or a short workout?
Just coffee. Yeah. Just coffee. And even on a weekend, if I'll go out for 2 or 3 hours on some trails, just coffee.
No creamer in it?
No, sometimes I have a little of this product called Health Code, which Ben Bigman made. He's the guy. If you want to talk about insulin, get him.
Yeah,
on
I know. I've had him a couple years ago.
Yeah, so I like his product. I'll just put like half a scoop of the chocolate stuff. It's got little protein.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's brilliant. I like it, and use a little whisker.
Yeah.
But otherwise, just a little bit of coffee.
Yeah, I've been doing Laird's Superfoods. They have a Laird's creamer that's coconut, has some MCT oil and some adaptogens.
That would be perfect.
I'm getting the unsweetened because it doesn't have the coconut sugar in it, but because I can't do, everybody has stevia and monk fruit and erythritol, and I can't do any of that. So I'm just going back to the unsweetened and just add, some collagen or creamer stuff in it. But that's always a big question, is to eat or not to eat, when to have something beforehand, especially a female athlete, is always like, what did you eat the night before? When did you stop eating? Are you fasting too long? And when is it another stressor when you're already stressing your body in your workout? So it gets so confusing. It's like, well, what's the intensity of your workout, your duration? What did you eat the night before? And what else, hormones for females.
And I think it's so individual too. So like if what works for me, if it doesn't work for you, don't do it. So if you want to add, people on longer runs want to add a little bit of like low glycemic stuff, you just don't want to spike your insulin, have a bagel before you go out the door. But, if you have something with some fat protein, a little, tablespoon of nut butter, or bring a little UCAN gel on a ride with you, which is kind of slow release carb. If you're going to be out there a couple hours, sure. Electrolytes are key too. This is like it's because I've been drinking this up like crazy. This is just the non-caloric hydrate. Yeah, so it's good. I'm recovering from COVID now, so I'm going through gallons of
Yeah.
been sweating heavily the last 72 hours. So
Yeah,
just
me
drinking
too, but not,
electrolytes.
that's
Yeah.
because it's hot here,
It's
not because
100
it's cold.
degrees in LA.
Yeah.
Don't get
So
COVID.
I
It's more
think
fun.
it's important to talk about, what to eat, the when and the why for athletes. But if there is a point to add in carbohydrates, and that it's natural carbohydrates, because as I said earlier, people are afraid of any carbohydrates. And then when they are able to give you, that backup engine for rocket fuel. So if you are doing a higher intensity workout or doing I did 6 p.m. track workout Tuesday night, that, should I have something beforehand? Because a lot of times I think we're type A, AAA, ambitious, high charging athletes that we think more is better. Like, okay, I could do this totally fasted and not eat. And like a long bike ride, I could not eat, but when does it impact my performance? I'm actually going slower. And when having a little something, real food sources can improve my performance when I'm trying to get faster and stronger.
Yeah, I think that, Debbie, comes down to blood glucose. So if you have a 6 p.m. track workout and you had lunch at 11 a.m. and your experience last time you tanked at like the second interval, your blood glucose probably tanked. And, I've got one of these now in my arm, so a glucose monitor, will at least give you data, on what's going on with you. Yeah, CGM. So I haven't exercised today, but, it's pretty flat. Had some eggs this morning, but probably, again, you're going to be using those insulin independent pathways while you're exercising. So I think something that has a drink maybe that would have just a little bit of carbohydrate and probably a little bit of caffeine at that, it's an after workout thing. Play with that because, and even between, like if you're doing a track session between intervals, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, that just like brought me back from the dead. I mean, yeah. And like in all these ultras, like these old school ultras, I mean, there's little shots of Coca-Cola, like at every aid station, not big amounts, just like a little bit that can bring that blood glucose back up. So that does not affect your fat oxidation, but it'll make that exercise session not drudgery. None of us want to just suck through something and suffer. No, but just play with that. Not big amounts of carbohydrate, even like 10 grams of carbohydrate. 10 grams raises your blood glucose.
I think that's like what amount is okay, because we're afraid, I think most of us, because we've done this so long, or there's new people that they're afraid of spiking their glucose. And a lot of people are insulin resistant. I have type 2 diabetics, and they're afraid of adding any carbohydrates in and sticking to more of a keto carnivore. But their performance, I think, is suffering. And so it's like, all right, what even are carbs that are good quality sources of real food that's not going to cause my insulin to go up too high, but will help me perform better?
Yeah, I think your important differentiator there too, as we spoke before, Debbie, is who is insulin resistant type 2 diabetic and who's insulin sensitive. Well, the person who's on the type 2 diabetes spectrum, their body can't handle carbohydrates. So that's the group I'd say use a lot of caution, because their glucose is going to go up high and their insulin is going to keep cranking up to try to store that glucose because they're resistant. Whereas someone who's fully insulin sensitive, you put glucose into them and their insulin needs to go up just a little bit and knock on the door, and it puts it right in your muscle and liver. The insulin resistant person, they use the same amount of glucose and their insulin has to bang on the door. So getting a medical evaluation, so if you're pre-diabetic, diabetic, central obesity, high triglycerides, we call it the metabolic syndrome, increased blood pressure, we need to get you healthy first. And then you start to worry about the nuances of how much carb you're going to add for your exercise, because what we really worry about is heart disease in those people. Because if you have metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, we know data in the women's health study, it's 21 years, 28,000 women. So if you have that syndrome, you're a 6 to 7 times risk of cardiovascular disease. And it's like, oh, maybe you shouldn't be doing intervals now.
Yeah.
Get a calcium score. So that's coronary calcium score. Like who is the person who might want to mellow it out because of their cardiovascular risk, and make sure they're building those mitochondria. Where that person who's uber well, they're just trying to play with performance. And some people thrive low carb for performance and some don't. Mm-hmm. So if we have well people, not all well athletes need to be low carb, all get fat adapted by training in zone 2, high or low carb. That's what I think the missing piece is. People think, oh, these carb eating Tour de France riders, they're massively fat adapted compared to the general population. Now, compared to someone like Zach or, one of the true low carb elite athletes, no, those guys can burn more fat than the carb eating endurance athletes. But all the endurance athletes are massively fat adapted just by the fact their mitochondria work so well. They can burn fat. Eliud Kipchoge running a 5-minute mile, burning fat like a beast. And he's eating a lot of ugali. But his machine, he can burn fat like the best of them at probably the highest rate of speed and efficiency.
So can you just summarize? 'Cause I think there's a lot of people that are insulin resistant and type 2 diabetics that are endurance athletes because they're reaching out a lot. So what are some steps, things that we can just kind of review, summarize, and step 1, what should they do to get started on being a low carb athlete? They're trying to do marathons, Ironmans, but they're, I see people's blood chemistry labs and their cholesterol, their insulin, no one's ever, it's hard to get people to doctors test insulin, but, A1C, looking at all their inflammatory markers. How can people get started if they already are working on nutrition? Just keep doing that, and what to do with their exercise, how to time that. Maybe.
Yeah. So if you're listening, you could do kind of a little checklist. And I have a little book I give to patients I can share with you. It's our little patient guide on how to start. So if you have 3 of these 5 situations, you have insulin resistance. And this goes back to the early 80s, a gentleman named Gerald Raven. He published about 1,000 articles on the topic. So one would be central weight. So are you carrying weight around the middle? And most people just know that by looking in a mirror. Phil Maffetone will describe it as 2 times your waist should be less than your height. So just, are you an apple shape? So if that's a check, yes. Do you have high blood pressure or on blood pressure medication? So that would be top number 130, bottom number 80. So if you're higher than that, you've got that one check. Do you have triglycerides over 150? And high triglycerides means your insulin is packaging carbohydrate. High insulin levels packaging carbohydrate, really trafficking that to your adipose tissue. So triglyceride over 150, HDL if you're a woman under 50 or a man under 40. And what happens is the HDLs, as those triglycerides go up, the HDLs will kind of try to repackage those. So the HDL, it's always a seesaw effect. As triglycerides go up, the HDLs tend to go down. And the other is abnormal glucose, fasting glucose greater than 100, or if you have the diagnosis of prediabetes by what's called a hemoglobin A1C, and you can get one of those kits at any CVS or pharmacy. Oh. So if you have 3 out of 5, you got to reduce your carbohydrates. You're by definition are insulin resistant, carbohydrate intolerant. If you have all 5, you really got to do it. And as a doctor, the people that are really sick, the people who are fully type 2 diabetic, you could call it prescription strength low carbohydrate. So these folks need to get ideally to about 20 grams of carbs a day to unpack that liver. It's probably not most people listening to this show. These are people that are super sick because they need to totally reset, control, alt, delete, their body, they're burning 0 fat even during their sleep. Now, people that are fat adapted, high level athletes, they can stay in nutritional ketosis, eating 100 grams of carbs a day because they're just churning through the carbs while they're exercising. So that group can be more liberal with their carbohydrates and still be in a similar metabolic state. So find a good clinician to be able to look at where you are in this spectrum. The more you're in that insulin resistant state, the more you got to slow down because you really have to retrain your body to use fat for fuel at rest and during activity. And as like we were mentioning before, they start walking out the door and their respiratory exchange ratio is 1. So they're not burning. It's still good for their muscles, but it's not going to be fun because they get acidic and they're just, no one really likes that. So we want to get those folks to slow down. The pool is amazing for those folks because they tend to carry a lot of weight, joint issues, and their heart rate gets up super high doing anything weight bearing. But getting in a pool is magical. And I'm sure you've trained people in a pool, Debbie, and people that have trouble getting up off a chair. they get in the pool and they're like gloriously happy, and they can move and they can swim, and like get them in a pool. You're in LA, you've got lots of pools.
Yeah. Or San Diego, I go to Solana Beach, which I have my swimsuit because I was going to master swim today and then I got busy. So it's just a way to keep cool. But I think it is like I know Dr. Eric Westman says 20 grams of carbs a day, and then other people say 50 grams. But for athletes that are working out, but they are showing signs of insulin resistance, they can go a little higher, like 100, even more, I've heard. But would you say, as an endurance athlete, do you find, is it important to stay in nutritional ketosis all the time, or to flex in and out of it if you are prone to insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes?
No, I don't think. I just think you want to be efficient at burning fat for fuel.
Yeah.
People that have been, like, I've played with all these meters. Once you've been low carb for years, even decades, your body becomes very efficient at utilizing ketone bodies. So whether you've got a breath meter or a blood test sample, the levels tend to get lower doing the same thing the longer you are in it. And unless you're using a ketone level for something therapeutic, so patients who have seizure disorders, neurologic disorders, specific levels of ketone, which cross the blood-brain barrier, help those conditions. But if you're just looking at exercise, how you feel, sometimes just go intuitively by how you feel. So don't be tied to the meters. And no, you don't need to be in ketosis.
You want to burn fat, to be burning fat in your long workouts, and spare glycogen unless you're doing a surge or speed work or, your grand finale to the race to the finish line. But I think it is like, you're burning fat? Should we want to see 0.1 ketones, 0.5?
You can be burning fat and drawing a 0 on your ketone meter.
That's what I'm trying to tell people.
Yeah. You don't need to, no, you can be 0.0 on the ketone meter. And if you just went out on a 4-hour bike ride, maybe took 100 calories the whole time, and you came back feeling good, you were burning fat on that bike ride. I mean, there's no other way around it, don't be I think those are good measures to get people, just aware and started. Most people who are kind of failing in this, the carbs kind of creep in, at least on the medical side. But I don't really use a lot of ketone meters with patients. I think I'm dealing with patients in rural West Virginia. Just getting them to check their blood sugar is usually enough. Adding another layer of complexity, but Virta Health, for example, which is getting amazing results. Like you, Debbie, they have coaching, so all of their patients get high level coaching 3 times a day. So they're using ketone meters, because if someone's kind of, fallen off a little bit, okay, this is just a marker that can help the coach remotely. Okay, where's this patient was doing really well, and now they're gaining weight again, and sugars are going up, and their ketones went back to 0. And then you'd say, if it were you, Debbie, just what's going on in your life the last couple of days, not judgmentally. And you'd be like, oh, shoot. No, it's fine, right? The bread came back, you went out to the bar and started drinking craft beer. No, it's all okay. Just get back on board.
I know. That's what's hard for people. It's usually doing family activities or going out with friends or going out to restaurants or a party. And they just, I was trying to tell people, this isn't a diet. You're just eating real food. It's a lifestyle. And it's just, this is what makes me feel good. And someone said once earlier this year, I think it was Low Carb Conference Cruise that we did with Dr. Ken Berry, and that you're protecting yourself. You choose not to eat those whatever processed foods or that wheat, vegetable oils, because you're protecting yourself, and not feel guilty that you have to eat everything you're served at someone's house, or, you're at a party and that's all there is to eat, how you can make the best of it. But I think it is when people get off the rails that I think they're thinking it's dieting. They're still in that diet mentality, rather than this is how I choose to eat to make myself feel good and not have to feel crappy for days afterwards.
Yeah, people ultimately, Debbie, they just kind of change their identity. And I think that takes a while for it to happen. And you've coached people, you've taken people who would never identify themselves as athletes, right? Somehow they find you. And then a year later, and they don't have to be winning races, but they found a new tribe. And it's like, oh, I'm an athlete, and this is how I behave. And their identity just changes. And they can go into a church picnic at that time, and there's mac and cheese and all this stuff, but they're fine. And that takes a while, I think, and once people are in that space, then they're good. Right? They could have a cheat meal, but they don't have a cheat day. And patients have told me that so many times. They've learned that lesson again and again.
Yeah.
Like you can have a bad meal, but you can't have a bad day, because then it all goes off the rails.
Right.
And we call it self-sabotage.
Yeah.
They self-sabotage. Maybe it's like missing 2 straight workouts, right? Never miss 2 straight workouts, because then you're I've blown it, right? But no, it's all good. So anyone listening here, if they've never self-sabotaged or had a bad day or a bad meal, or then you're probably not real. So it's all fine.
Yeah.
Just work on changing your identity. And I love Ken. I've met him several times and spoken with him at conferences. He just shares the love of this, and he has such a way to make this so simple, plain, and clear.
I know.
And just
his
common
YouTube
sense.
videos. Dr. Ken Berry, if anyone wants to learn more, he just has these videos as
go to his
viewers.
in-your-face YouTube videos.
Yeah.
He's another, Southerner, Appalachia.
Nashville.
Yeah.
So we're going to be out of time, of course, but the best place to find you and watch videos, because it's another show to talk about running form and drills and things, how we can get faster, talk stuff I haven't talked about for 10 years, probably what we did with Ian eons ago.
Nice.
But how we can get faster running. I know you had some YouTube videos. You've got Two Rivers.
Yeah, we have a retail store here.
Yeah.
So probably the best place you can go, and it'll link to all these places, is drmarksdesk.com, because then you could get to the shoe store. We have a website called Natural Running Center, which has a lot of videos of all the running form. And then I wrote a book. It's called Run for Your Life. And we have a website for that book called runforyourlifebook.com. And then there's a resource page, which has all kinds of videos on drills and running drills, strength training stuff. So if you want to dig deeper into that stuff, those resources are there, and they're all free.
I will check that out, because I've been into those. Do you ever watch Knees Over Toes Guy?
Yeah, that's a really good exercise that's like really powerful stuff. Like for just, I'll do that every day in some kind of platform, just almost down to ground level, being able to, smash my hamstring against my calf. But that's a great assessment to show where people are just locked, whether it's technical or.
I know it's crazy, because I know my left side has been this area of opportunity for a couple of years. And I found like trying those things, I have to hold on to something to do it right, to get this left side to fire. But people can
running backwards too. I like those guys talk about running backwards.
I did that yesterday on the beach. Forward, backwards. Torrey Pines, great mile run you can do. So
beautiful beaches.
I know, that's my benefit of living here, just 12 miles into the beach, Torrey Pines, Solana Beach. It's perfect. So we'll put everything in the show notes. And then if you want to come back on, talk the rest of it, and I'll add a little extra to the finish if people want to know more about some drills in your video I can talk about too. So thank you so much, Dr. Mark.
Well, pleasure to be on, Debbie. Stay cool there in LA. I hear it's like a decade heat wave this week.
I know, it's supposed to be 105 on Sunday.
Jeez.
90s at the beach, so it's a little toasty.
Wow.
Thank you.
I'm glad we're able to work this out.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.